Imagine you have just crossed two financial milestones. The first is $10,000. Maybe it's the first time you look at your savings account and realize that if something went wrong, you wouldn't immediately panic. A broken car, a sudden bill, a few weeks without income. Then, years later, you reach $100,000, and something strange happens. You expected the second milestone to feel 10 times better. It doesn't. For many people, $10,000 feels emotionally enormous. $100,000 feels emotionally enormous. And the reason isn't that you're ungrateful or that money stops mattering. It's that your brain doesn't experience wealth as a number. It experiences wealth as a change in what you believe is possible. That difference explains why the first $10,000 can feel like freedom, while the first $100,000 can sometimes feel like another number. When you're building your first $10,000, every dollar has a visible job. You are trying to create distance between yourself and financial disaster. Suppose your monthly essential expenses are $3,000. With $500 saved, a $1,000 emergency can feel like a crisis. With $5,000 saved, it feels painful. With $10,000 saved, it feels painful. With $10,000, something changes. You have a buffer. The money hasn't just increased your net worth, it has changed your relationship with uncertainty. The first few $1,000s aren't really buying investments or luxury. They're buying breathing room. But then the psychology changes. Imagine a hypothetical person named Daniel. Daniel starts with almost nothing. He saves his first $10,000 slowly, making small sacrifices along the way. He cooks more. He delays purchases. He watches his account grow. When he reaches $10,000, he feels proud. More importantly, he feels safer. Then his income rises. His savings become $25,000, then $50,000, then eventually $100,000. Objectively, he is dramatically better off. But the emotional experience isn't dramatically better off. Why? Because the first $10,000 solved a problem. The next $90,000 may not solve 90 times as many problems. That's the first hidden mechanism, diminishing emotional returns. The difference between $0 and $10,000 can be enormous because it changes your vulnerability. The difference between $90,000 and $100,000 is real, but your daily life may barely notice it. But there's a second layer. As your savings grow, your expectations often grow with them. At $10,000, you might think, I finally have an emergency fund. At $100,000, you might think, I'm still nowhere near a house. Or retirement. Or financial independence. Or the lifestyle you imagine by this age. The number gets bigger, so does the reference point you're comparing it against. A milestone that once seemed extraordinary can suddenly feel inadequate. This is where financial progress becomes psychologically deceptive. You don't compare today's wealth with yesterday's wealth. You compare it with the next thing you want. A person who had $20,000 and reaches $50,000 can feel behind someone with $200,000. Someone with $200,000 can feel behind someone with $1 million. Someone with $1 million can look at housing prices, retirement projections, or people online and decide they haven't made it. The finish line moves because your brain is remarkably good at adapting to its new normal. And that creates the second hidden mechanism. Wealth can become invisible once it becomes familiar. Think about your first meaningful raise. Maybe your income increases by $10,000. For a few months, you notice it. You think about what you can do differently. Then your brain adjusts. The nicer apartment becomes normal. The larger monthly budget becomes normal. The extra money disappears into your baseline life. The same thing can happen with wealth. At $10,000, seeing that balance may produce relief. At $100,000, seeing it every morning may produce almost nothing. Not because the money became less valuable. Because familiarity made it less emotionally vivid. And there is an important consequence here. You can spend your financial life chasing the feeling you had when you first became secure. You earn more. You save more. You invest more. You hit another milestone. And for a moment, you feel the old excitement. Then it fades. So you move the target again. This can turn wealth building into a psychological treadmill. The number keeps rising. The feeling keeps resetting. The feeling keeps resetting. But there's a third layer. Your first $10,000 often changes what you can survive. Your first $100,000 can change what you can choose. That's a different kind of value. Suppose Daniel has $10,000 in cash and loses his job. He's still worried. $10,000 doesn't make unemployment comfortable, but it may give him time to search instead of accepting the first job he can get. Now imagine he eventually has $100,000 in liquid investments and savings, alongside his other financial assets. That doesn't mean he can retire or stop working. But it may give him more ability to say no. No to a terrible job. No to an impulsive purchase. No to a lifestyle he cannot comfortably maintain. No to making every decision around the next paycheck. And this reveals why the emotional meaning of $100,000 can be easy to miss. Its biggest benefit may not be what it allows you to buy. It may be what it allows you to refuse. That's the part we rarely calculate. We calculate the return on the money. We calculate the interest. We calculate how close we are to the next milestone. But we don't always calculate the value of having more room between ourselves and a decision we don't want to make. This is why a growing net worth can become psychologically powerful even when it stops feeling exciting. The money is quietly increasing your options. And options are difficult to notice because they often appear as things you don't have to do. You don't notice the job you were able to leave because you never had to take it. You don't notice the debt you avoided because the emergency fund absorbed the shock. You don't notice the purchase you didn't make because you weren't desperate for a reward. Financial security often looks boring from the outside. So if you're somewhere between your first $10,000 and your first $100,000, there are 3 useful questions to ask. First, what problem has my money already solved? Maybe it's emergencies, debt, or simply the ability to handle an unpredictable month. Recognizing that matters because otherwise you may treat every dollar as if it exists only to reach the next number. Second, what new expenses am I quietly normalizing? If your income rises while your fixed costs rise with it, your wealth may be increasing without your freedom increasing at the same rate. A raise that becomes a larger rent payment isn't necessarily a raise in your choices. And third, what can my money let me say no to? This may be the most revealing question of all. Wealth is not only about having more things. It is about needing fewer things to go right. Your first $10,000 may have felt better than your first $100,000 because the first milestone gave you something emotionally immediate, relief. The $100,000 milestone may give you something quieter. Distance, time, options. The ability to absorb a bad month without turning it into a bad year. And maybe that's why the biggest financial milestones don't always feel the way we expect. The point of accumulating money isn't to permanently recreate the excitement of seeing a bigger number. It's to gradually become harder for ordinary financial problems to control your life. The first $10,000 may make you feel safe. The first $100,000 may make you more difficult to control. And those are 2 very different feelings.